This is John Drabinski, and you're listening to the Black Studies Podcast, a Mellon Grant-sponsored series of conversations examining the history of the field. Our conversations engage with a wide range of activists and scholars, senior figures in the field, graduate students, and everyone in between, cultural workers and political organizers, in order to explore the cultural and political meaning of Black studies as an area of inquiry and its critical methods. Today's conversation is with Rosa Clemente, a scholar, activist, and late-doctoral candidate in the Department of Afro-American Studies at University of Massachusetts, Amherst. In this conversation, we explore the complex questions of Afro-Latinx identity, cross-racial and cross-ethnic solidarity, and the meaning of Black studies in times of deep political crisis. Good afternoon, Rosa. How are you today?
Good. How are you? And thank you for having me on this podcast.
I'm good. It's a, hot, sweaty August day, but sitting here behind air conditioning and talking to you. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast for a lot of reasons. So I really appreciate you making the time. I think the way you work between all sorts of ways of addressing Black life in terms of political activism, in terms of cultural commentary, in terms of scholarship. In some ways, when I invited you and you responded, I was like, fantastic. This is exactly, I think you're exactly the kind of intellectual activist that Black studies has always, aspired to sort of work towards and create and cultivate. So for me, it's a real privilege to have you on the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to what you have to say.
Thank you. I mean, I'm happy to talk about it, especially it's my life. And then in these times, particularly where so much of the work we do is under attack,
I mean, the under attack thing, when Ashley and I started this podcast, it was really about the fact that the 50-year anniversary of Black Studies founding and as a university institution happened during the pandemic. And so there really wasn't time for so many of us to get together and sort of honor the founding. And so we thought this podcast could be a way of addressing that. But of course, fall of 24, as you said, we just live in times where everything we do is under such attack, not just ideologically, but literally with rifles and grants and every weapon. And so it ends up we're actually documenting, I think, this moment where it's either Black studies pushback and resistance and survival, or the last days of Black studies. We'll hope for the former. So, but we'll have a chance to talk, of course, about the kind of work that you do and you're interested in, kind of writing, and its relationship to the field of Black studies, how you imagine the field of Black studies. But I wanted to start really with a more personal question and just ask you, what drew you to Black studies? What drew you to the study of Black life? And for me, always this question along with it, what sustained you in relation to this kind of work?
Well, I was born in the Bronx when the Bronx was burning and hip hop was being created. And then I was born in 1972. So, I know you'll edit this. I'll start over. I was born in 1972 in the Bronx, New York. And at that time, the Bronx was always ablaze or some type of fire because the insurance guys would burn or set fires to buildings and stuff to get the money. But in 1977, the big blackout that lasted for days, my mom decided, it was time to move out of the Bronx, particularly because of the public school system in Westchester County. So, the Bronx is still one of the poorest congressional districts in the country, and then Westchester County is one of the richest suburbs in the country. Mm-hmm. So, 18 miles apart, 2 zip codes, I was in a completely different world. That a little town called Elmsford, New York. And at that time, we were the only Latino family that moved in. But my mom was very purposeful in every weekend going back to the Bronx where most of my cousins and family were there. My dad has had a business there since 1968, and he still has it. So it was this weird dichotomy. And the older I got, I began to at least realize that my cousins who were just as smart, but because they were living you know, in the Bronx at that time, the stereotypes of Puerto Rican women just get pregnant for welfare, and the men just shoot up heroin and end up dying. Like, that was my cousins were going to school, so nobody was telling them they were important or anything like that. And I was going to a public school at a high school that would be considered almost private,
Mm.
so I was involved in everything. And I was very proud. I was 100% everything Boricua, Puerto Rican in my house. My father and mom made sure we always went to Puerto Rico, visit our family. So I knew I was Puerto Rican. I knew I was going to college, and that's what happened. So my first year there, it was rough because I was not a great teenager to my mom, but I was very smart and I loved to read.
Mm.
But when I got to college that first year, it wasn't like I was missing home. I was just like, I have freedom. Like a lot of freshmen, I really messed up and almost failed. My mom said, you have one opportunity to turn it around, and I did. And what I did my second year is I joined organizations, and one of them was Albany State University Black Alliance, ASUBA. And I had been involved in so much in high school. I ended up being like the class president. I like being with people, high school wasn't like political, but seeing the Black Student Union. And at that time, because it was 1990, was an incredible moment to go into college, because we're also, my crew of people, we're coming in post the apartheid falling apart era and the 80s movement of college students. So anyway, I joined and I went to the first meeting, and they said, this is ASUBA, this is what we do, this is what we stand for, this is space for people of African descent. So I went up to a brother the next, after, and I was like, oh man, I don't belong here. I'm not a person of African descent. I'm Puerto Rican. And he's like, no, you are Black. You are an African descendant. And you know what? Read this book and you should take a class. And I did that. I took Intro to Black Studies and Intro to Puerto Rican Studies. I was full on leadership in ASUBA. By 1993, my fall year, I became the president of ASUBA. By then, I had already dropped my political science major and went into Africana Studies. And through Africana Studies, I met Dr. Vivian Riddell Gordon, who was one of the founders of Upward Bound, one of the founders of the National Council on Black Studies. And she did her work about Black psychology and Black women and Black lives. And she just started taking me to events. And then when we would bring up speakers, like she would bring Sonia Sanchez, Dr. James Turner, Beverly Guy Sheffield, Coretta Scott King. Like, Dr. Gordon was friends with all of these people. It's an incredible time too because of hip hop. And once I became a ASUBA president, once I was elected, I was called a sellout by other. At that time, maybe people were using the word Hispanic because it's 1993, but I was called a sellout by some Latino students that were popular in the newspaper. And then one of the administrators brought me in and said, you have to decide, are you Puerto Rican or are you Black? You can't be both. And I was like, you're an administrator, you're supposed to be supporting me in leadership, and I can absolutely be both. So for me, once I was with Dr. Gordon in Black Studies, that was it. And also, this is the golden era of hip hop. So there was a lot happening. And as you know, no social media. Like, you had a phone in your suite. You had a pay phone. Nobody had a car. You don't have cable in the rooms. It was like every day was fun and fulfilling. And I was doing so much. And I just found my voice in that. And Dr. Gordon, unfortunately, died very quickly after a disease, and she left in her will a note for me and my three other people. And in mine, she said, you need to contact Dr. Turner when you're ready to go to Africana Studies and Research Center, because I'm letting you know right now, you're responsible for our people and your scholarship needs to be for our people. I called Dr. Turner and I was in Cornell 3 months after that in 1996.
Wow. This That's a phenomenal story. Not story, a journey. I mean, I'm struck by lots of things. The Bronx and Westchester. I mean, that's almost seems like a movie, right? But it was actually exactly what you were dealing with in terms of figuring out these questions of race, class, and being a teenager. I mean, like I wasn't a very good kid.
Yeah.
I unfortunately really related to that. I was like, oh yeah, I got to call my mom. So, but talking about the relationship between those questions of race, justice, identity, scholarship, activism, the way what you're talking about was just two really kind of chance encounters. The fact that you did go up and say, hey, I don't belong to the leadership, to a person in leadership. You easily could have just said, I don't belong, and left. I mean, I think that's what most people do. But he also could have been like, well, if you don't feel like you belong, see you, right? But didn't, right? These chance moments of somebody like taking care to be a teacher, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, a professor is a teacher by design, but not all professors teach, right? In these kinds of moments, put in a will, call Dr. Turner,
Yeah.
these kinds of touches. And so I'm interested, just to go back a little bit, that those are about, those elements are about a sort of social life, and a social life that's political and cultural and infused with all the things you talked about, and then also a intellectual life of the classroom. I am interested in how that connected to or was disconnected from the way you described the kinds of questions you were wrestling with between the Bronx and Westchester, and the fact that you really love to read. Was that reading sort of as a young person related to the kind of things that happen in college, or was college is really this like, left turn in terms of like really charting a different path?
Well, I mean, again, when I went to college, I began to know about like the economy. Like I knew we had money once we moved to Westchester. Me, my sister and brother, everything. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Um, she did everything. She took us everywhere. She made sure we were always at a park or an art center or something, or traveling to see, at that time, where most of her brothers and sisters and my abuela and abuelo were, in living in Youngstown, Ohio. Because my abuela and abuelo has 16 children. So when my mom was born, she was born in Puerto Rico, but she ended up being with all her other brothers and sisters in Youngstown. So I knew my family. I mean, I knew that we weren't the same color. Like I know, like, one of my cousins has red hair and blue eyes, like legit my cousin. But I think there were a couple of moments at some family stuff where I kind of peeped how some of my uncles would talk about Black people. And because also I'm in a moment in history when I'm grappling with some of this, like we live here, and then my cousins live here, and if we lived here, we wouldn't have money, but we don't. And my mom just was not good at even telling us anything. She's like, this is our life, and I tell you what to do and stuff like that. So when I got to college, I don't think I even had the word capitalism look, I know I didn't read any black authors in high school, right? Like it was still suburban high school. And with that, our community was pretty tight. So we never really grappled with questions of race until the Central Park Five, because that's when I was in high school, when Donald Trump went after the Central Park Five, who everybody here will probably know about it, but the young brothers that was swept up and what that ended up meaning for Black and brown kids, but especially like my boy cousins who were also always stopped by the police. So I'm it took me a while in college to like say, oh man, this is what was happening, because this is what happening in the out world and how it has its impact. Plus, I just really wanted to get out. Like I said, my family was very financially secure, and we lived in a very utopic little village where we all got along in a way. But me and my mom battled a lot.
Mm.
And I think some of the things my mom was trying to protect me from, um, especially getting pregnant at a young age, I think it threw her for a loop because everybody would always think it was my female cousins in the Bronx were getting pregnant because of their environment. But here I am in Westchester at 15 years old, pregnant, because my mom never talked to me about anything. And all I knew was like I would fuck up and she would punish me, and then I'd have to go to church to confess. And all. It was just it was real crazy. Like, people would think like, "Oh my God, you grew up like this and you didn't have all." I said I had more shit than my other cousins. And also because my dad was a great provider but was always working, and I really didn't have a relationship with him. So I'm coming to SUNY Albany with like all these things, grappling with my family stuff, and in fact I never went home. Once I went back to sophomore, I never went home. I stayed the summers in Albany. I stayed working. I eventually go to Cornell. So it was a little, like you said, not a yeah, like contradictions, but I didn't know why.
Mhm, mhm.
So it was going again to SUNY and then being in Black studies, then taking Black psychology. I also began to understand like my parents and my mom, and like, why did this happen? How didn't they like it? It was it was enlightening, but I was also really angry for a long, long, long time with my parents. But when things started getting better, the thing that made me realize how important my journey was going to be is that one day I talked to my father about the independence movement in Puerto Rico and other things. And I started bringing all my reading materials to my dad. So as I was becoming politicized, he was becoming politicized. Like, he went to a couple protests with me. He began to understand, why he was treated, as he said, as like another Black person. He told me a story about like him driving a cab and pulling over and the police calling him the N-word. And he's like, "No, I'm Boricua, I'm Puerto Rican." And they said to him, "We don't care what type of N you are,
Mhm.
the N-word." So it brought me and my dad together, and my mom, I know, was like, I think she was more like, "Okay, it's okay." Like, she's on a good path.
Hmm.
And from there, again, that's how it came together with me. There was not like you said, there's some specific moments, but really it was a journey of becoming enlightened. And then it made me want to know everything about me as a Puerto Rican. I didn't know why we were US citizens. Like, my parents never were like, "This is why Puerto Ricans are not like Dominicans, or you're US citizens." I didn't know about the Independence Party movement. I didn't know about the nationalists, and I'm spending all summers in Puerto Rico. You know what I'm saying? And I'm a little darker, but my dad and my sister are way darker. And I began to peep how people were treating my sister, and just things like that. But it really came together once I got to Cornell with Dr. Turner.
Hmm.
That's when I was like, "Oh my God, I'm doing this for life." And I remember Dr. Turner saying, "Some of you in this room came here to get a degree at Cornell. No, you get a degree from Africana Studies and Research Center, and you become a scholar activist." He coined that term. And he said, "The work that you do is for our people." It connected me back to what Dr. Gordon said. And then it connected me back that the thing that always made me feel better when I was going through these issues in my teenage years was reading.
Mhm.
So I would like ask my mom, like, just pick me up in 4 hours, and I would stay at the library. I read everything and anything I could. And it really gave me like, there's a lot of other things in this world, and one day I'm gonna know what they are. So definitely was my love of reading. My mom said, my mom said one day, with all the crazy stuff that you did as a teenager, you always got good grades. And my mom's like, "I don't even know how you did that," because she wouldn't even do homework with us. She's like, "I don't know what that is. Do it or don't do it," kind of thing. And she's like, "You were just a student no matter what." And she's like, Everybody in the community would always tell me how amazing you were when I didn't feel that from you as a mom. And I said, yeah, and people loved you as a mom because you treated everybody really good, all my friends, but that was not the mom you gave me. So being able to talk to my mom because I had confidence, we still battled for a while, but it was reading. It took me away, like people said.
Yeah, thank you for that. Uh, I mean, it does in some ways really lead to this next question that I have, because you're talking about the transformative effect of reading, right? The scholar part of scholar activists, but also the activist part of activists, right? The politics and the political reframing that you had in these educational moments. I mean, it is such a reminder, and I really like being reminded of it, that what we do in classrooms can so intensely reframe someone's life. I think
Yeah.
that, for me, that's a reason to take the classroom really seriously. I mean, there are lots of other reasons, but that's the really deep existential one. I mean, we potentially reframe somebody's life, but also why that relationship of teacher and student has to be undertaken with such care, because
So important. Yes.
it's one thing to say, hey, you're reframing someone's life, but when it's your life reframed, it's like, wow, I might actually need some kind of care structure here. But I think those kinds of moments like blend really the origins of the field of Black studies, which, in the late 1960s and early 1970s had this dual demand, right? College students were demanding that there be a place to study Black life, that disciplines as we knew them didn't cover Black life in any kind of substantial way. And Black studies was going to be a place where that study happened, where intellectual life happened, where insight, reading, and writing on Black life happened. But of course, that was also a moment where the radicalization of Black liberation struggle had really contested those boundaries we might have between something like study and activism, between ideas and prescriptive action, between the classroom and the community. And so Black studies also was founded in this deep political imperative that to do Black studies is to be committed to a certain kind of politics. And I hear both those things in what you've talked about. And so I'm interested, you have undergraduate and graduate work. It's all in Black studies, right? What is that portrait of Black studies that you work with? What's that picture you work with, especially in relation to this tension that's at the founding of the field, and I think really with us as we think about it today?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just, how do you imagine Black studies? What's that portrait for you in relation to things like intellectual life, but also political activism?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I was at Cornell, I had become politicized, and then with Cornell, the history of the day hall takeover of 1969, because like I'm at Cornell, Dr. Turner, Professor Harris, like again, the giants in the field, and I quickly became involved at Cornell with student groups where usually, you're told you're a graduate student, you can't do all of this. Dr. Turner was telling us, no, you must do all this. So if the undergrads are going to protest something, you as grad students need to be there with them so they know leadership skills. Every Wednesday, the Africana Studies was open until 2 a.m. in the morning. We had like all types of students and like he created like a lounge environment on Wednesdays and things like that. But because Cornell had that history, also being the only school where students had guns, and that famous picture of them walking out of Day Hall, winning what they fought for, put on Time magazine, and then it's been so attacked. Like Cornell can never get away from that. It's part of the history. They always try to erase it. So then again, at Cornell is where I really dug in deep with the leadership and then like activism, and at Cornell is then my mind really expanded. I was learning about political prisoners and all of this. But look, Dr. Turner, he would go to Cuba and like, this is what Fidel said is happening. We'd be like, Fidel Castro? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, or then like, seeing him, and anybody who would be like, "Oh, you're working with James when you're ready to come get your PhD." Like, every moment at Cornell was so exciting. But Dr. Turner was also like, "You're not a great writer, but we're gonna fix that."
Hmm.
And he really was like, "You have to learn to write," and I said that's my biggest fear, because I was told in high school one time, like, "Not only are you're a bad writer, you're never gonna go to college," kind of teacher said to me. Yeah, so it's never been divorced from me, and I think sometimes is why, I seem it seems to me that people are, intimidated by me, uh, or so I've been told, and I was like, "I'm smart." I'm like, "Why is that intimidating?" And I've always been a friendly person, but seeing those 2 years at Cornell, there was a moment with some of the students in my cohort, kinda turned on me, and they they accused me of plagiarism, and, the faculty all knew, and Dr. Turner brought me in the room, and he's like, "Tell me how you're gonna handle this."
Hmm.
And I was like, "ABC," and he's like, "Exactly, and that's how you handle that." So I also but Dr. Turner said, Look, you're real different. You're Black, you're Puerto Rican. People listening to you say your last name, they're gonna think, oh, she's just Puerto Rican, she's just this." He's like, "You're saying you're a person of African descent. You're saying you're Black." And he would always talk about anti-Blackness, not in those words, but he's like, "Listen, you're in between two communities. You got to make you don't have to make a choice, kind of thing." But Black studies, why? Because Black studies, not the people, the discipline, has always been my home.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been battling with Latinos at every level for decades who called me a sellout, who were like, "You can't be Black. Why are you trying to do that? You're not this." On the flip hand, I sometimes have some African-American peers like, "Yo, you're mad light-skinned. You don't know what it means to be in this. You just got here because you're different." Like, I was always dealing with that. But because Dr. Gordon, Dr. Turner were like, "If you're going to be in this, you got to like get a thick skin, because you're going to, people are not going to understand you." And Dr. Turner also made sure that I was going to do my thesis on the Young Lords, because he was telling me, right, like, I hadn't heard of the Young Lords until I went to SUNY Albany, and by that time I had relationships with all of them that were still alive, kind of things like, "You're going to write about the counterintelligence movement," and that's how I found out about Fred Hampton, and that Fred Hampton had a son, and and the places and the people he was bringing through Cornell. That's always been my home. So Africana Studies undergrad, Cornell Africana Studies and Research Center, my master's, and then UMass Amherst. We actually get a master's as well from there, and my PhD. I have never felt accepted in, quote, Latino studies, Chicano studies. You know, all I felt connected to, especially when I moved back to New York, was Puerto Rican studies and Black studies. And yeah. And look, Cornell is this important. Dr. Turner was getting his PhD that time at Northwestern. And he had been him and John Bracey had done a lot of work in Detroit around the black the black, I can't remember, it was something that they started, and then also Dr. Turner as a co-founder of NCBS, like, he was always at everything and he would bring us, kind of thing. But Dr. Turner stepped away from finishing his PhD because the students who took over at Cornell demanded that he would be the one. And that's what Cornell did. They brought him, and he started Africana Studies and Research Center in one office. And now when you go there, until very recently, it was his own standalone discipline. Now they finally have the PhD, kind of thing. So I also learned that Dr. Turner, he's like, "I never gave anything up." He's like, "I was just young and I might have not been fully prepared." But I mean, he was young and he took it. And, I say to this day, Cornell's Cornell because of Dr. Turner.
Yeah.
And the decades long, and how, lastly, I always said to Dr. Turner, "You talk to all of us every day. Like, when do you talk with your family? Like, are we taking you away from your family?" And he goes, "No, because my entire family is Black studies, so I would always just be like sitting with him and talking as much as I could. Um, so when we lost him a couple years ago, that was really rough for a lot of us. A
Yeah.
lot.
It's interesting in this podcast. I've been surprised and really happy, very happy surprised how often his name has come up. It says something about multiple generations of influence that he's had. And even I did an early podcast in the series with a couple of Cornell graduate students, and though they didn't study with Turner, his legacy was on the tip of their tongue, and they talk extensively about him and his work and what it meant. And so,
Yeah, Kimberly Crenshaw was at Cornell Law, but she was always with Dr. Turner. And that's why, like, she did her work around critical race theory, right? We have lawyers that would graduate, and you're right, like, those Wednesday night meetings were just not for Africana. It was for the community at large. So we also had community members, but then some undergrads would come, so those multiple generations, and then you see the work, and you're like, yo, because Dr. Turner just was always smooth, and he never raised his voice, but he would, like, break it down. So yeah, like you said, there were so many people not in Africana studies as a student that were always there all the time. And lastly, on the thing, my last thing on the Black studies, and then as I was finishing my PhD or the coursework, Dr. Melina Abdullah reached out to me. We had met at a conference, and she said, I want to bring you out to Cal State LA and give you a visiting 1-year professorship, and I want you to teach the Afro Black Latinx class you've been wanting to teach for a while, and I did. So again, it's like Africana studies, I was still learning. Not that it would matter, it should matter, but Dr. Turner was like, no, you have to study the Puerto Rican people, the movement, that's your people. And then Melina giving me this thing in Pan-African Studies. She's like, no, I want you to do the Afro-Black Latinx class. So you would think like some Latino studies and Chicano studies would be like, oh, that would be dope. But like I said, not at all. And that's why, and I've been in all the disciplines, Africana, Pan-African, and African-American disciplines within Black studies.
I mean, you've articulated really well how much you're, this emphasis, and claiming of Puerto Rico as part of the African diaspora
Absolutely
is a boundary pusher in multiple areas, right? It's not just as you've said, it's not just pushing boundaries sort of inside sort of Latinx studies and Puerto Rican studies, but also in Black studies. And so that I think that boundary push is incredibly important. I mean, I spent years at Amherst College, and we had a couple people who worked on Afro-Latino studies, and just talking about the struggle of trying to bring Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Dominican Republic into the conversation about even just the Caribbean. I mean, they're located in the sea, right? Yeah, but this was still a struggle, but also to locate them in the Caribbean Sea and not this, broader thing, Latin America, was to fold into this question of diaspora. And, I loved their work, and I loved working with them. I learned, as we all do, learned a lot from people working outside one's own specialty. But there's that struggle that you're articulating is ongoing and real, but it's absolutely crucial, I think, for the future of Black studies. And so I'm really glad that you're doing it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you sort of working from that, having done Black studies from the beginning, right? From college through graduate study, a master's, and then also PhD program. How do you think the fact that you've never worked in a disciplinary context, right? A history department, an English department, a sociology department, but have really worked in these multidisciplinary spaces. How do you think that shaped how you understand a research project? But also, how do you think it shapes, just as much, how do you think it shapes how you conceive and practice a classroom?
That's a great question. Well, at UMass, the first year we do we get 50 books, and that's for that year, 25 in the fall, 25 in the spring. I always have viewed Black studies as interdisciplinary for me, because we're not just studying we're not just studying history or art or culture, politics, literature. That first year, we're studying all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second year, so for me, then I would end up in the history and politics track. No, I have not ever worked in a department of history alone, department of English, and any of that. I don't think. Well, look, I think the discipline of history, like a department of history, to this day, I think they've made it very clear that there's only certain things they want taught about Black people, because they still see us as a part, right? So I don't think for me, I've never been recruited. I've applied to a lot of history positions. I haven't gotten them and things like that. Yeah, I don't know why, because again, to me, it is interdisciplinary. Like, there's an assumption that if you are learning Black studies, you're not learning anybody else. Or if you're in the intro to civil rights history, that you can tell, particularly in history departments, the aspect that they really teach is more the civil rights legalese and court decisions. In Black studies, we're going to talk about that, but then we're going to talk about Black power. And then we're going to go beyond Black power, and we're going to talk about the Black Liberation Army. And then me beginning to see Puerto Rican radical tradition, or Black radical tradition, it's always been intertwined for me. Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that, because I know obviously not everybody ends up going into Black studies. But for me, Black studies, again, is not just a scholarship. It's the community. It's you respecting elders, you pushing back on elders pushing back on you. Like, I don't think there's any other studies that does that. Like, I don't think ethnic studies does that. I know Latino and Chicano studies does not do that. I mean, even in 2025, they still don't want to talk about Black Latinx people, Black Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and all that. And a lot of the younger people that I know that identify at this moment as Afro-Black Latinx have found their space in Black studies. And like you said at the beginning of the question, Black studies in general should be embracing Afro-Black Latinx history, culture, politics. Like, and I think you're beginning to see some of that, but it has to be expansive now, because that's what Africana studies is. Africana studies is the understanding of Black people throughout the world.
Yeah.
Right? So as a Puerto Rican, once I know all myself and where I am now, Schomburg, who purposely to call himself a Black Puerto Rican, who created this field that we would all go into, who was in the Harlem Renaissance, he says a lot. He would go to the Puerto Rican and Cuban social clubs. He said he always felt at home, but that he always said, we are Black people throughout the world. So when Dr. Turner creates Africana studies, that's where Black studies becomes that expansive. Yeah, and I just don't think other departments or other disciplines do it like Black studies does it.
Yeah, and as you said, with the 25 books thing, 50 books, but 25 each semester. A model, by the way, I love. I mean, University of Maryland, my department doesn't have a graduate program, but we talk about it regularly, maybe trying it. But I've always been like waiting just to spring that as a practice, because I think it's brilliant. But also it's a reminder of how expansive your literacy and imagination have to be in Black studies. Like you do have to be able to work and read and think in multiple kinds of ways. And, myself, I did my PhD in philosophy and then switched fields in the late 90s and re-educated myself. And I was always really struck with how much harder it was to do Black studies because of the the 50 books. I mean, you have to shift modes of reading and thinking and talking, but also just how playful and fun it is, right? I mean, it's like it is
Yeah.
really fun to read a play and then read a history text and think like, what is this trying to say? Like, what does it mean to think these things together? And
Yeah.
I try to introduce students to that, and I think they actually really love it too because they're like, what kind of a class is this? And I was like, it's a classroom unlike any other because I actually do not have an answer for you. I like to tell my students like the real question of Black studies is what is Black studies, and so
Right.
we're basically gonna be exploring an answer to that in this syllabus. So, well, let me ask you a couple of final questions. First one, thinking about the 50-something years of the field of Black studies, what do you think that the field has done well, and what do you think it's not done particularly well?
I mean, what I think it has done well is created not their own institutions, but definitely created spaces in different colleges, universities, and nonprofit worlds, like, higher academia and what that all means. And obviously, like, when we study how Black studies began, it's never divorced from organizers or activists,
Mhm.
right? So, like, we like, and what I'll tell students is, listen, when the Black Power movement was at its height, it told students, Black students, no, you get in there and you change the campus from in there, we'll be out here. And then you got to come and we all connect,
Mhm, mhm.
So Black studies has done that well. I think the Black feminists, our Black feminist elder scholars were in there from the beginning and had to fight. And I mean, there's still departments in this country that in Black studies that don't even have a Black woman.
Mhm.
But learning about Black feminism and then also Africana womanism, like beginning to understand the effed up way a lot of our women scholars were treated in those departments, but then what they created, like I think Beverly Guy Sheffield and Barbara Ransby are incredible. And I'm so glad because they were there while we're being undergrads. Not just shaping, they're pushing progressive, and they're saying you can't have Black studies without Black women. That's crazy in itself. Things like that. I think I think at the moment, what Black studies is not doing well is, again, I believe there has to be an embrace of Afro-Black Latinx identity, and specifically studying that identity in the United States.
Mm, mhm.
Most of what we see, classes or anything around Afro-Black Latinx culture, politics, identity, most people study it in other countries. So Latin America, obviously Cuba, growing in Puerto Rico, Panama, Dominican Republic, like how you've been talking about the Caribbean. It's more, and my work specifically is studying Afro-Black Latinx people who were born and raised in the United States
Mhm.
and who particularly do Schaumburg in Harlem, the actual center, and hip hop, right? We've pushed that. And if they could embrace that, that would be good. And that's why I say it's my work that focuses, like, obviously I'm going to talk about Luisa, Puerto Rico, where that's the largest African descendant community, but I'm also studying hip hop artists like a Big Pun or Fat Joe, or like more the Latino sisters and brothers who also co-created the culture of hip hop, Puerto Ricans who co-created that culture. So that to me should be embraced more. But unfortunately, I'm gonna say the times that we're in, I think there are Black studies departments that are not fighting back, that they're just kind of worried about their own department or their own selves, right? I don't think they're doing a good job on, again, connecting with the people, so, and I've learned that in this process of finding work, where elders are like, you don't want to do all of that. Like, don't let them even know you're doing that. And it's becoming increasingly like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Because whether there are things that Black Studies isn't doing, Black Studies is always pushed. There's always someone in Black Studies that's saying, yeah, we got to move this conversation, or this is the situation now, where these are students that weren't students from 1990s. How do we connect to them, kind of thing, you know? So right now, I feel that when Columbia and Brown and UCLA and Duke and whatever two capitulated to Trump so quickly, didn't fight back as these institutions, I know the next level of attack, they're coming after Black Studies. And I wish that there was a larger conversation around that, and also that scholars in the field have to contend with many not doing any type of work within the community they're around.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I know they're coming after us. And it's not just Black Studies. Like, look, Black Studies is why women's studies got created, why Latino studies got created. It was Black Studies that then had the professors and the students also with the feminists like, no, the feminists need their department too, or Puerto Ricans need their department, or Black and Puerto Rican studies, you know. So we have to be very clear that they're going to come after us, but who they're going to come after are us and the smaller, like, colleges and universities no one is talking about, but have been forced to literally be like, we're eliminating this department, we're eliminating DEI. And I think that is what Black Studies needs to do more. I think Black Studies needs to, like, folks need to come together and say, look, this is not about DEI. It never was. It was about Black and brown people. And now it's about the surveillance of Black and brown people. And now it's about the capturing and kidnapping. And I get why that's hard to do when your institution then turns on you. So I also am very clear, I am not in an institution. I haven't been on a college teaching for 10 years, but I travel all around the country lecturing. And I know that people are scared. People are afraid. And I don't think it's now people willing to sacrifice. I think there's a lot of us that were willing to sacrifice, but for what reason if we can't keep Black Studies? And what does that mean? It's insane and it's heartbreaking. And I think, you know, I think Black Studies just has to, people got to get a little bit more courage.
Yeah, I think, you know, a couple of thoughts on what you're saying. I mean, I've said this on a few podcasts. I think one of the realizations that we're having in the field and are going to continue to have as this scrutiny and just elimination of departments, programs, and curricula and all that happens is, you know, Black Studies has never had friends on campus other than Black Studies. And so I think that we're often friendly with history or political science or English, but in the end, are they going to refuse to go to work on our behalf? Are they going to absorb our faculty if we get dissolved, or do we all lose our job? You know, it's like a million ways to play this out institutionally. But even deeper to the point, what you were saying is, you know, if we don't have friends on campus, what does it mean then that we don't have a friend in our surrounding communities? You know, that means essentially Black Studies departments are on an island, some of which is just the result of, you know, the academy being a racist institution. And so it doesn't have, and also ruled by scarcity logic and panics and all that. That's why you don't have departments on your side. But the island that's created is what you were saying about what is this kind of relationship between Black Studies departments, the kind of study that we do, and struggles for racial justice right across the street. And when you don't have that community, you really have, no one has your back. And we're going to have to deal with the fact that one of those wounds is really self-inflicted. And contrary to, as you've elaborated, contrary to the very founding of Black Studies, which insisted on this.
Yeah.
And I would also add, I mention this all the time. I get a little bit of eye roll in person on it, but I'm just going to say it, keep saying it. It's also a reminder that, you know, Black Studies didn't come about because we people with PhDs wanted Black Studies. It was because the 19 and 20-year-olds were willing to put everything on the line
Yeah.
for this. I mean, it's scary to stand up to an institution when you're 19. Also, 19-year-olds tend to not think about long-term consequences, which is to their strength politically, right? They're like, we need a different world rather than I need to manage my position in this scarce
Yeah.
system. But, maybe in this moment that our only allies are students. And if that's it, I think that's actually a good thing. I don't believe very much in academics.
Yeah, I agree with you on that 100.
Well, let me ask a last question then. In some ways, you may have already said this, but I'll ask it. What do you think in a Black Studies context? What do you think's the issue you would want us to all be talking about? What's the question you would want us to all be asking?
Yeah, I think I go back, but in another way. I think more understanding, like the transnational African diasporic peoples throughout the world. I think there has to be more of bringing that internationalism in Black studies, and I think part of that is also that I think a lot of departments in humanities are not doing well, is to really like understand right now at this moment that no matter with it being a global world, unless you're in tune, you don't know anything that's happening. I mean, Haiti, Sudan, obviously Gaza, Palestine, and with all the sacrifices students and faculty throughout these universities have made to let the world know that this is a genocide. I think we should be also teaching classes on leadership development. Like if I was chair of a department, that's what I would do. I would intro like a straight, maybe professional, not use that word, but I definitely would be like, you're in here for scholarship and activism. How are you going to relate what you're writing in your paper to the community? And I would want an intro to leadership development or intro to community organizing. I have not seen too many departments, Black Studies departments, but I have seen positions out there that are using the word social advocacy, social justice. And unlike a lot of them is the humanities, right? History for the most part, or sociology, So an understanding of Black people globally is critical. And look, we have to contend with the fact that we have students who don't read books, that kind of dumb it down, as Lupe Fiasco says, works to, for the enemy to keep doing what they're doing, and lastly, no, I think that's what I would do with Black Studies. How do we reconnect back to communities if we're not doing that? How do we teach to be an activist? How do you have also contend with you doing this stuff? You might end up getting kicked off campus, kicked out of your department. But I think now what is happening right now in this country, this is when Black Studies should be on blast. We got people don't understand the connection between slave catchers and ICE agents. Let's bring that conversation together, not just as a comparative conversation, but also something that Black Studies has always taught well is that Black people are always under attack in this country and in this world. And now it's full frontal attacks. How are we also going to contend with the militarization of our communities?
Thank you for that. That's an amazing place to end because it puts really the highest stakes. And I live just a couple miles from DC border, so also geographically for so many of us, the immediate neighborhoods and neighbors, and it's just I love you coming back to again and again to this notion that we may be in the institution, but what does it mean for us to continue to report on the trouble of the world, but also forge weapons against that? And I will just say, mentioning this thing about leadership training, I just, that was just like a symphony for me, because I just the idea that you have the right values and analysis, and that makes you an activism, is an issue, because you got to organize people, and that's an actual skill set. So I really appreciate you. I'm going to talk to my department about this. I really love this. So just as a one-to-one, I'm really glad that you said that. I'd never thought about that as a way of addressing it. I've thought it many times, like, you got to, like, that's a skill set to organize human beings, but I never thought the obvious. Now that you say it, people teach that stuff.
And for now, with the social media tools we have, like, I've seen a couple professors really bring Black history to TikTok. You know what I'm saying? Like, we should do that. You should be in a class, like, let's learn, like, let's debate the issues, and maybe take the last 10 minutes of, let's pick a campaign about the work we're doing and how everybody in the room could amplify it together. Like, those are fun ways of learning too.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much for your time, Rosa, and for the thoughtfulness in this. You've raised so many, like, really interesting issues, of course, really interesting reflections on your own, like, intellectual and political journey. There's just so much in this that is going to be really fantastic for listeners. I'm really glad to have you in this series. So thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this podcast. I was very dope when I found it. So thank you for interviewing me. I appreciate it.
Well, have a great rest of your day.
You too. I'm going to email you some stuff.
All right. Sounds good. Take care.
All right. Take care. I'll leave it on.